moisturizers, and therefore therefore the more important part is about, as I said, we as a company, we as a researcher sell benefits, but the consumer buys experience because they actually evaluate, and that experience is more important. That you might have seen when you use anything, for that matter, the personal care, you look at it as your experience. Are you happy with that product? And that extends everything. It's from a physical to emotional and memories, because and that's why people have so many brands in a personal care, because people keep switching, and this experience is more important for the product, but the experience also need to be a substantial and experiential part is where the research comes. I just wanted to tell you, I don't know whether how does the pharmacy works from a, because once you are out of this research and when you get into a whatever it is, business research or research supporting the business, there are two three things which stand out. And the cycles of research in consumer products is slightly slow compared to smaller, compared to pharma, which generally takes 10 to 12 years of before from the conception to the product is out. uh, the personal care products are generally 6 months to 2 years. That's all. Beyond that, a market doesn't give you time, and therefore there are a huge amount of interest, and the demands from the business comes on you. First of all, you need to be unique. You should have huge amount of consumer centricity, because it's about experience, and therefore you should understand your consumers well, which doesn't mostly happen with pharma, because pharma looks at only benefits and which are very clearly measurable. You should be scalable. You should be viable because it should make money. You should be predictable success, because business doesn't want to get into anything which is going to fail. So at least when you're putting into the market, it should have some signs of victory. And you should be all the ahead of competition, because so many brands are happening there. And that is what makes this industry different from a pharma. That is a huge amount of dynamism, huge amount of consumer visibility, and huge amount of assessment happens every day. And that is what is different. Now, I will just go to what is happening in skincare, and it's very interesting. This chart, I will put it. I don't know how many of you studied skin, but it's a highly dynamic and adaptive organ. And you might see that across the seasons, as you age, the skin keeps adapting to the new realities. And therefore, the skin structure and the functionality keeps changing from the birth. Therefore, the skin of the newborn is very supple, where the skin of the age-old person is very rough and dry and wrinkles. Um, and if you look at what it's made up of, the skin is made up of lipids, proteins, natural moisturizing factors called amino acids, urea. So the part of this one, the function of skin is about what? It should protect you from the external insults. So nothing from outside should go in, and therefore it is one of the fantastic filters the nature has. Only water can go in, only few salts and something can go in, but nothing more which is harmful to the body can go in, and therefore it is fantastic filter which is on the skin. Also, it is continuously losing water. So the skin is changing, and therefore the changes in skin happens because of two reasons. One is about intrinsic. That's because chronologically you age, and therefore the lot of changes happen in body. Like you start reducing the sebum secretions, which is a emolliency on the skin. Thinning of the skin happens. The higher pigmentation, the people start becoming slightly darker. Lower collagen, which gives you wrinkles, and a lower renewal rate, which gives you much drier flakes. These are all intrinsic. This happens because of your biology. This happens because there's a DNA makeup which governs all this. But a lot of things happens from a lifestyle also, because you are continuously exposing the skin to the external environment. So we keep cleaning the skin all the time with waters and surfactants, cosmetics which are chemical we put on the skin. There's a UV insult onto the skin all the time. The pollution puts a lot of stress on this. The nutritional deficiencies which doesn't make the skin recover, and the higher friction of skin because it keeps abrading everywhere. Now, all these things, if you look at, gives you something called as a compromised skin. And a compromised skin is generally, and that's what people don't want, a dry skin, the pigmented skin, uneven tone, the lower oil content, less elastic, highly diffusive, something can go inside. You get a lot of the eruptions of acne and sagging. Okay. So this is what is called we call it the compromised skin. And it happens because of a huge amount of biology and the external environment. So it's not only about external environments, it's about the biology which actually make these changes. And then what consumers need then? Consumer needs is about, and therefore we call it as a skincare boot camp. Okay, what is that? We want a basic skincare needs because you need to protect your skin, prevent it from damage, cleansing, sun damage, and moisturization. These are basic things. But beyond that, because skin is the largest organ. Uh, Skin is the largest organ which is exposed to everybody. I'm saying not environment, but everybody. Everybody looks at you. Hair and the skin is something which talks about your health, your beauty, and therefore anything happens on a skin, people are just get worried about it, and that's why they want to revert it back. So everybody wants a kid's skin or a newborn skin on there, which is not possible. And therefore, people will try to look at improving the skin and a tone, redensification, that what has been lost, can you put into the skin, and can you biologically make it happen? Managing the sensitivity because the skin starts working with a lot of chemicals and therefore it becomes sensitive, maintaining the blemish-free skin and the creating and maintaining an even skin tone. So there's a huge amount of requirement on the skin, and all this happens because internal biology or something from outside makes the biology to work to make the skin, which is called as a compromise or not healthy. Now, first part, if I want to tell you, is about a skin barrier. And that happens because there are a lot of environmental stresses I talked about, aging skin, which the skin becomes thinner. There's a stress because cortisol and adrenaline creates a problem with the entire skin constitution and the hormonal changes. And all this actually makes the skin go through a lot of fatigue, a lot of changes. And this has a clearly impact on a skin barrier. Now, this barrier is more important because if this barrier doesn't exist, entire cellular fluid will get lost to the environment. And therefore, this barrier is actually a controlling factor about how much water can be lost to the environment. And it's more important to create this barrier again. Now, this barrier is made of lipids, proteins, NMF, which is amino acids, urea, and proteins, right? Now, the lipid gets oxidized, the protein gets denatured because you use a lot of soaps. Now, how do you basically, there are two ways to do it, and therefore people call it barrier recovery. How can you allow the skin to recover back? Because if you don't allow skin to recover back, you will have huge amount of loss of skin and you'll start getting a dry skin. And dry skin has its own problem because dry skin then starts cracking and the external pathogens can go inside. And therefore, it's more important to keep the skin integrity. And therefore, a lot of people do what they do is there's a huge amount of lipids people start adding, but the lipids are generally made through biofermentation. Lipids or oils, you can get it as synthetic ones like a petroleums, but people now started using a lot of natural triglycerides, biosynthesized lipids, the algal lipids, because that's the way you actually resupplement the lipid which is oxidized. As you know, the skin has a huge amount of microflora, which is called as a commensal. It kills the pathogenic bacteria which sit on our body, and this flora has to be maintained. If this flora is not maintained, the skin becomes very clearly amenable to the external pathogenic bacteria, and they can get inside. So there's a huge amount of probiotics and a prebiotics. So the probiotics are the bacteria which have been added, which can increase the level of or the population of the bacteria on the skin. Prebiotic is something on which the bacteria grow. So a lot of work is happening on a polysaccharides. A lot of work is happening on a sugars, which can allow this natural flora to grow. Because this particular bacteria do huge amount of reaction on the body. It's not that they're just sitting there, but they generally hydrolyze the triglycerides and create lipids. Those lipids ultimately save the skin from losing the water. And there's a huge amount of ingredients which can soothe the skin from inflammation and sensitivity. Now, inflammation is a part of life. Inflammation happens in body. Oxidation happens in body. But when they happen beyond the limit, because there's a redox balance which happen in the body and the skin, and therefore anywhere the inflammation goes up, oxidation goes up, this lead to disease. And therefore, it's more important for stopping the inflammation. So all those enzymatic pathways like cytokines. There are transcription factors. All those has to be controlled, and that has to be done through the ingredients, and that is what we do. And so these are the three things which people are trying to do on a barrier recovery. The huge amount of science on a biology, the huge amount of science on a physical. I mean, how do you create the balance of that skin where the moisture retention happens and a huge amount of humectancy in the skin. If the skin dries up or loses water, a lot of enzymes don't work, and therefore in a winter when a lot of skin dries up, you see the flakes coming up. That is because desmosomes do not get broken up and you get a larger specks. And all this happens because of the skin is not getting to its normal state. The second one is this is called as a healthy aging of skin. As you know, the skin keeps aging, and the skin keeps aging. When skin ages, the lower sebum comes out, and therefore low oil into the skin. The collagen catabolism happens faster. Elastin and fibroblasts, all those MMPs work on this, and the catabolism, all these things happen faster. And therefore, it's more important for us to get this. There are two ways to do it. One is about how do you make anabolism a creation of ceramides, creation of collagens, creation of elastin to the higher level, and that upregulation happen through a lot of ingredients. Also, how can you provide the refortification of the skin from the outside to the creams? So cream has two type of strategies. One is about get the ingredients like coconut oil. If you apply coconut oil on your skin, you actually get the collagen synthesis, which is more. And this is the paper we have published that 3 months of collagen usage every day, sorry, coconut oil usage every day can see the collagen bundles can start creating below the epidermis. So there is a huge amount of work which is happening, and what is happening is aging might be a more of biological and medical definition, but now it's coming into the beauty and health and well-being. So entire thing is now clubbed together, and the aging of the skin is a big one which is being studied now. The second one is the psychodermatology. Now, I don't know how many of you know that if the person is stressed, okay, if the person going through the stress, his skin looks darker, and therefore people who are happy or doing meditation, their skin glows. And that's because this stressful situation, the adrenaline and cortisols, which is floating in the blood, actually creates a problem onto the skin. And the stress also goes to something called as the disorders. So we call cosmetic as a conditions, but there are disorders which are dermat like rosacea, eczema, psoriasis. This happens because of this test. And the psychodermatology is big one which is coming up, because what is happening with the dermats is dermat generally gives statins, steroids to take care of these problems, and steroids has its own issues, and therefore they are looking for something which is cosmetically amenable, not steroids. And how do they look at the natural ingredients to come to the rescue of this rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, atopic dermatitis? And that is what the big one which is coming up now. And there the huge amount of pharma thing are required, because all these diseases has a huge amount of biochemical pathways which lead to this part. There are a lot of disorders which happen in a typical biochemical pathway which leads to this part. And that is what is required. And therefore, if you look at, people are talking about, first of all, neurocosmetics. The first of all, we were looking at how do you reduce the stress, and therefore there are materials like cannabidiols, mushrooms, and these are the ones we actually, there are a lot of aromas which are being talked about, and that's what I've talked about. There are aromas which actually can reduce the stress, and therefore some people, some smells we like and we become happy, some people we don't like it, and that's more because the aromatherapy basically creates that biochemical changes. And there's something called the dopamine. Okay, there are fragrances which create a dopamine or activate the dopamine receptors in the body, and these are called as a therapeutic perfumes or a mood boosting perfumes. And these fragrant molecules, their interactions has been seen through either EEG, electroencephalograph, through brain waves, or they are seen through the amylase or cortisol analysis in the blood. So you allow people to smell these perfumes and then look at the changes happening in the body and then select the perfume like that. But these are the biological changes which happen in the body, and good amount of pharma knowledge can come into this, and use also, because what happens is there are, since these stressful conditions create the skin which is dry and exfoliating wear, how do you create those excipients which professor was saying about the excipients which penetrate better. So I think the skin is about, the most bigger challenge about skin is about how do you allow some actives to go inside, because skin is such a fantastic filter that nothing it allows to go inside, and therefore how do you create the delivery technologies for taking the things inside. This I talked about pollution. Now pollution has a two effects. One is about UV. The ingress of UV onto the skin, UVA and UVB, actually creates two things. One is about, it creates a huge amount of oxidation stress in the this one. It creates something called a reactive oxygen species, and which ultimately gives oxidation stress. Also, another one is it starts creating good amount of melanin, and therefore there's a cosmetic part of it, and there's a health part of it. So when UV comes onto the UV incident happens on the skin, it generally gives you good amount of pigmentation, because that's a body's response to create SPF in the skin. The body creates SPF through creating melanin, and there again an entire biology keeps happening, and there are a huge amount of enzymes like tyrosinase, which is creates melanin, then phosphodiesterase, which supplies melanin into the skin. All these people are just to make the pigment lesser. People are actually creating those parts. Okay, people are trying to inhibit this or inhibit these enzymes so that they can become slightly skin tone can increase. Another one is because of UV, there's a huge amount of ROS happens, and the oxidation happens, and the inflammation sets in the body, and which gives you redness, burning of the skin, and a peeling of the skin. Now, how do you do that part? One part is about sunscreens, but sunscreens are basically a chemical moiety which absorb the UV and then dies off. So they are called as sacrificial molecules, and therefore, generally, if you use sunscreens, people say that you should use sunscreens again and again after 2 hours, because they just lose their efficacy because of degradation through UV. So how do you stop that inflammation? And how do you create take care of the oxidative stress so that the skin doesn't get damaged, because all these things damage the skin structure, and this is which is coming up now, and therefore how do you basically look at these external aggressors and take part of that. And even particulates, I think particulates is one of the big thing, because the particulates generally stay on the skin, and when you move your hand on the skin, they start abrading your skin, and the skin layers get disturbed, and therefore that's more important to look at. So how do you create washes, and how do you create creams which can take care of that UV stress? The second one is about skin and mind connection, and I talked about this. It's about the, I think there are a huge amount of connections with happening between the skin and a lot of happenings in biology. The skin and a gut microbiome is something which is coming up now. The skin and a diabetes is coming up now. The skin and the mind connection which is coming up now. So huge amount of, because I think if you look at modern life, it's about a stress, anxiety, poor quality sleep, are because these are more pressing issues you have. So consumer are looking for a holistic solution, because if you take care of your mind, and there is very clear um, uh, 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 study which comes out that if your mind is stressed, your skin functions suffer, because mind stress creates huge amount of oxidation in the body. It creates a huge amount of inflammation in the body, and these are all well-known effects which happen in the skin, and people have now started playing with that. So we what we do is, there's a holistic approach on this. You go through you go through touch, you go through scent. You should There are visual stimulus which can make you calm down. There are a lot of colors. So, but all this ultimately gets measured at the biochemistry of those. So stress comes out. So these are all stimulus which you give. They are the inputs which you give, and then you see that whether the stress comes down. There are a lot of ancient rituals and practices which are happening, which is like Ayurveda, Chinese medicines, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, which are coming up. And that happens because over a time, these ancient rituals have given some benefit. Now, it may not be possible that contemporary science or current science may not be able to explain that. But there are experiential rituals which people see that part. So, aloe vera for that matter, coconut oil for that matter. Not People know only the effect of applying coconut oil, but nobody knows the science. So we in Marico actually did a good amount of studies for 10 years and seen that coconut oil has a collagen boosting property. Coconut oil penetrates in the skin 10 layers deep. Coconut has anti-hair fall properties. Coconut oil also has an anti-graying property. Okay. If you keep applying coconut oil, you might not get the gray hairs faster. I think ultimately you'll get a gray hair. That's a cosmetic, but you will not get it faster. And that is what if you see, go and see the hair in South India or southern states, you'll see the people have a darker hair compared to the population in North. And therefore, how do you create those mood boosting? And these all chemistry, these all biochemistry, which keeps working on that. There's a beauty from within. I don't have to talk to anyone about this because ultimately we were healthy, our skins were healthy because what we eat. Okay, nature has provided huge amount of mechanisms and actives which gives you antioxidant properties, anti-inflammatory properties, and that is what now coming as a nutraceutical. So beauty from within is something which is coming up where people see that when you eat certain foods, your skin becomes better, or skin becomes more moisturized, the skin becomes more uh, oxidation free. So if you look at vitamin E, when people eat, the vitamin E goes inside the skin bilayer and stops oxidation there. Okay, so internal body has a so if you look at the body has three types of antioxidant enzymes. One is SOD, the second one is catalase, and third one is GSH, which is glutathione. Now these three enzymes are supposed to take care of inflammation which happens in body or oxidation which happens in body. But when because of this entire lifestyle, when the oxidation goes up dramatically, these these enzymes are not sufficient to take care of this oxidation, and therefore you need something from outside. And therefore you'll take a flavonoids which are colored fruits. You take tomatoes because that has a lycopene. All these have antioxidants which supplement the inner antioxidant enzymes, and that's why you take care of antioxidant. But all this part is done through a food. Okay, and therefore, if you look at the lot of nutraceuticals is coming up just to take care of this innate power of natural materials which we can use. And since these materials are well known and we are eating, there's nothing called a regulations on this. Okay, only there are regulations on the claims which people make, and otherwise there's no much regulation on a consumption part of it. And this is actually coming. As you'll see the shots of green tea. You see the shots of Danone. This one. That probiotic milk, all those will keep happening because they provide the benefit which creams provide from outside. They provide from internally. So this is what people are talking about phytochemicals, and you will know these carotenes, vitamin E. I think there's a huge amount of research on if you take arginine and if you take histidine, amino acids, which are not made in the body. If you do that, the skin moisturization increases. If you take collagen hydrolysates, okay, some part of this collagen hydrolysis after this one goes to the skin, and therefore all these phytochemicals ultimately give the body benefit, but also it reflects on the skin later. And this is I think I wrote here the effective collaboration between dermatologist and nutritionist, but I think there is a huge amount of collaboration needed from a pharmacist also because the more important about your pharma knowledge which comes in, I think there's a huge amount of aspect of biology, enzyme chemistry takes over because that is what is more important because nutritionist knows only food and their ingredients, but the pharmacist can actually look at what is happening inside and what is that we should do. And I'll come to the next area later. This is something which is coming up very big, and I don't know, you possibly uh, may not understand the gravity of this, but I think if there's no water, how are you going to create detergents? How are you going to wash your clothes? If there's no water and there's no water to drink in, how are you going to basically take shampoos and clean your hair? And this is a big one which people are now working around, that how do you create the waterless product? And this possible in not more from a pharma side, but it's more from a physical chemistry side and more from a surfactant side, that how do you make dry products, waterless products? Because there are two things happen. Waterless, with the product in a water gets all through the conveyed through the supply chain, and it's a cost. If you give, instead of shampoo, if you give one tablet of dry shampoo, and it creates a cleansing action of the normal shampoo, a huge amount of savior of a cleansing water and huge amount of saving of formulation water. So these formats are coming up now. You say that what is difficult in this? The difficulty in this is the delivery system which we have created for water systems may not work here, because you're not going to add water, and therefore new delivery systems for targeting the actives have to be designed, and that is more important. And that science is more of a physical science and possibly engineering science, which talks about dissolution, surfactant science, talks about delivery and permeation into the skin. I think we don't have to talk about this part, natural power. We have a huge amount of inputs, and our Vedic knowledge, our Ayurveda knowledge gives huge amount of natural power. Now, the challenge which happens in natural power is about that whenever you take a Ayurvedic, because I'm talking just from a global point. So whenever you take your Ayurvedic knowledge outside, people will always have a lot of negativity on Ayurvedic. One is about they have certain trace metals, like metals which are not good for the body. The second one is then there's no data. And there's no data. There's only a data of consumer research for so many thousands of years. But beyond that, if somebody wants to, and therefore the Ayurveda comes at a crossroad with the new sciences, because contemporary science wants the entire data to be done through the in vitro, in vivo, instrumental analysis, and all those electronic gadgets. We don't have anything on Ayurveda on this, and therefore, I think more important part of the pharma or a biologist is to take those actives and create those datas on this one, which is now happening on turmeric for that matter, and it is happening on a large way on ashwagandha, because it is also coming in the mainstream. The second part, and that part is about entire this processes of Ayurveda has been done age old. Now, many of these processes may not be right for keeping the phytochemical integrity. So many times they boil in water, they take in alcohol, then same thing they put in oil and then keep boiling about 12 hours just to water to evaporate. In a conventional separation or scientific techniques, physical chemistry techniques, if you look at, this is slightly not addressed well, because you are heating the entire extract for 12 hours at a temperature, oil at a temperature of boiling oil at a temperature of nearly 120 when the water evaporates. So entire phytochemical integrity might be just lost between this heating cycle. And there was a huge amount of process science which is required to see that the Ayurveda goes through the very milder techniques, and therefore you can extract as much as possible, and then it is delivered. So there are process techniques, there are isolation techniques, and then there are validation techniques, and these are needs to be done, and which is currently being done. So curcumin is actually going through that, and curcumin's understanding in India is now taken a world over, and then most of the papers are now coming through China about how does the curcumin goes inside the body, what happens to the curcumin, how what are the metabolites are being generated, and all those metabolites. And it's very interesting that curcumin is very difficult to enter the body, and whatever enters in the body doesn't remain as curcumin, because it very quickly moves through the reductase or sulfatase enzymes, and it goes into tetrahydrocurcumin. So what body sees as a benefit of curcumin is because of tetrahydrocurcumin. So it's not about curcumin, because that's the way the body metabolizes curcumin very fast. So all this, so we have a huge amount of advantage about entire Ayurvedic formulary. If you take that and put it through, I think pharmacognosy, looking through the sciences, looking into the validation techniques, it created a huge amount of value for India, and we have make in India ingredients, and that's more important. So if you look at skincare research, I never talked about lovable sensories, but this I will spend 2 minutes on this. So the lovable sensories is about anybody. If I give somebody coconut oil, he will never apply it, because I don't think that's a lovable sensory, because When you apply coconut oil on this one, you'll become sticky, and that's why people don't apply coconut oil on the hair because their hair becomes limpy. Now, therefore, the people should be able to use a product and they should like the product. And modern beauty is slightly different than the beauty age old. You should have potent actives concentration combination. They should be stable in the product. And that's more important. They should not get oxidized in the storage. And the, and the third thing, which is more important, you should have a delivery into the skin. And that's a bigger challenge people are working. And I know that pharma is working on this because they also want to take their actives through the intestinal mucus, right? And therefore, they are creating all these actives. Now, you have that delivery knowledge coming into the skin so that the actives go at the right target action delivery and at the right concentration. Now you have a something like a systematic encapsulation where the active remains active all through the day and basically keeps delivering. The second one is it actually reaches to the skin because you need nanosomes, you need phospholipids. So all those things will be very helpful to skin. So you don't have load more active onto your skin, but the active will actually, whatever the small active you put, it will penetrate into the skin. And that's more important. Let me come to the hair care, and that's more important. I don't hair care is I think hair care is something I work very closely like skin care. There are three types of hair on the skin. One is about lanuga hair, which happens when the newborn baby is born, and then within 3 to 4 months, it just goes off. Then there's something called a vellus hair, and there's a terminal hair. Vellus hair is the facial hair, which is we can't see the small amount hair which happens all over the face. And a terminal hair is something which you see on the hair, on the head, on the beard. So these are terminal hair. Now, I don't know how many of you know that one strand of hair can lift 100 grams of weight, and that's the power of this one. So if you take entire hair on healthy ladies or on a younger generation, and you just take it all the hair and tie it together, I think you can pull the 1.5 ton truck along with that, and that's the power of hair. So hair is a very it's like aluminum thread, but it has a very different structure. It has a cuticles which are called scales on the top. Then it has a cortex and there is a medulla. Medulla is a hollow part, and in this cortex there's a melanin which is sitting there, and that's what gives you black color of the hair. Now more important part is about hair fall and which people talk about. Now, I don't know how many of you know that as the skin keeps moving up and skin takes 8 weeks to regenerate, the hair also goes through the cycles. And these cycles are called anagen, which is a growth phase, which nearly runs for 4 to 6 years. Then there's a catagen phase where the hair starts gets into dormant phase. Actually, it becomes dead, and this entire follicle starts receding. Okay, that's called the sleeping phase, and the telogen is the shedding phase, and therefore you shed the hair, and this comes out, and then at that time the follicle becomes very small, and this is where the follicle becomes very small, and this follicle then again starts growing, and like that in a lifetime, people have 8 to 10 cycles of anagen. Now, therefore, hair falling is not a problem because out of 1 lakh hair on the hair, 100 hairs fall every day. Again, that's a normal. When the hair fall happens more than that, people start noticing hair and they call hair fall. So falling hair is a reality of life. Only thing in a human being, this cycle is asynchronous. So all the hair do not fall at the same time, which happens in rats. Suddenly you see the bald rats because in the rats, this is synchronous cycle. So all the hairs will shed at the same time. In humans and most of the mammals, it doesn't happen at the same time. And therefore, there's always some hair in anagen phase, some hair in telogen phase. So there's 90-95% hair in a growing stage. There are only 5 to 10% and a telogen and a catagen phase, which are now falling phase. And this is that is what is more important. Now, and genetically, people are supposed, the genetic makeup allows people to lose hair faster or slower. Okay. And there are three types of conditions which has. androgenic alopecia, which happens in males. So you see the bald patch, and that's called permanent hair loss because there the entire follicle becomes smaller and smaller, and the follicle is existing, but it loses terminal hair, and the terminal hair becomes a vellus hair. There's something called alopecia areata, which is autoimmune. This one, and you see certain people getting quick patches on the hair, and that's the autoimmune system getting triggered, and you get a smooth skin, but you lose all the hair. There just patches come. And the third one is telogen effluvium, which happens mostly in ladies because of entire variations of hormonal cycles. They keep losing hair, or a pregnancy, they lose hair, but those hair come back. And therefore, telogen effluvium is very clearly can be done. Permanent hair loss, which is called androgenic alopecia, is slightly difficult to manage. Only thing you can delay the thing. So on a hair fall, you can always delay the things. So if suppose you should have you possibly lost hair, certain number of hairs by 50, you can always create a um, uh, recipes to say that you lose hair till 70, and that's what. But it is yet difficult to totally stop the hair fall, and that is what the entire. But if you look at entire cycle of enzymatic pathways and the entire biochemistry which runs an enzymatic pathway, you get amazed, okay, about this hair. And this is entire biology. There's nothing called, there's no cosmetic. It's about a biology, and that is what you should understand. So now hair loss, and this is I'm calling out a hair loss about hair follicles. There are a lot of conventional treatments for hair loss, right? So there's a drug therapy, minoxidil and finasteride. The minoxidil basically was actually the drug which was created for the cardiac disorders or cardiac problems, but ultimately people found that when they started taking, people started growing their hair, and therefore the minoxidil is now one of the theory, and also and it's a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. Now, main problem in hair, which is identified now, other than anything, is about a testosterone. When the testosterone goes to dihydrotestosterone, it miniaturizes the follicle, it reduces the follicle. And therefore, this enzyme called as a 5 reductase inhibitor, so I reductase, okay, 5-alpha reductase. So 5-alpha reductase enzyme takes your testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, and you need to inhibit that. So a lot of these minoxidil and finasteride start inhibiting that conversion of, because high amount of DST, the follicles will shrink, and ultimately terminal hair will become a vellus hair. The surgical treatments we know people implant, they can take a follicles from the healthy side and then put it onto the hair, putting onto the surface which has become bald, and actually really surgical treatment because you have to just implement those and allow them to grow. The new treatment from strategy of hair loss is about physiotherapy. Now, physiotherapy is about there are rollers, there are rollers which have some amount of some microneedles rollers, and you keep rubbing them onto the scalp. They basically induce the hair growth because they basically they basically have some amount of injuries which actually create some amount of enzymes, and they give you growth. There are light therapies which are coming up. Okay, the light therapies are called light laser light therapy, which is coming up. Excimer is about UVB, and CO2 as CO2 lamps. Now, this light are actually the exciting the basically enzymatic pathways, and these are being used now. So a lot of these hair clinics now, you'll see that they are using this part of the red light. This is called LLT is about red light, Excimer is about UVB light, and CO2 CO2 laser. And they are very low radiation lasers, and they start moving and exciting this one. And there is a regenerative therapy, which is called as a plasma related this one platelet rich plasma therapy. You actually take the blood out and take the plasma out of that and start pushing that plasma again inside the skin where the scalp is about. And a stem cell therapy, which everybody knows, stem cells are the growing cells, and therefore, can you take stem cells from a healthy hair and start injecting them into the dermal papilla, which is the lowest part of hair. And non-medical approaches are one which is nutraceuticals. You have a nutrition deficiency, therefore you lose hair. So bioteins, there are certain vitamins are seen to be growing the hair. The bioteins, vitamin E, and these are called non-medical approaches because they do it on the food. one is about hair loss, but second, which cosmetic wise, which is more important about hair stand maintenance, because hair grows 1.5 to 2 centimeter mm, a month. And therefore, if you look at the 2 feet hair, it has already stayed outside the body for nearly 18 to 24 months. And therefore, this hair, again, like a skin, is undergoing through a lot of stresses. And how do you basically maintain that hair? So people do prevention of material loss is about people apply coconut oil, serums, and therefore say that the abrasion or the surfactant loss should not happen. They also start fusing certain peptides because hair is about keratins, right? And therefore start infusing because through the cuticles you can put a lot of materials inside. So I don't know how many of you know how the hair dye happens. Hair dye happens like when you treat the hair with alkali, the cuticles open up, and in that cuticle you put a PPD, paraffin diamine, and then oxidize it. Paraffin diamine, it goes inside the cortex and gets polymerized, and then it gets locked, and that is what your hair dye works, and that is what the hair dye technology is about. And then those molecules don't come out. Uh, so how do you basically allow the cuticle expansion and allow the material to go in? And that is what is more important. How do you create fortification? So a lot of people say about how do you basically reduce the friction. So there's a lot of physical chemistry happens on the hair about combing force. It's about tensile strength. So we used to generally look at the tensile strength. How can you use tensile strength? Therefore, when you're combing, the hair doesn't break. Uh, and I don't know how many of you know that the when you come out of shower and your hair is wet, at that time your hair is expanded by 70%. Okay, and that time the hair is very vulnerable. So how do you reduce that friction so during the combing you don't break the hair? So wet hair generally breaks faster. The scalp care is a it's called a skinification of scalp. What happens to the skin also needs to happen to the scalp. So people say that the scalp has a embryo for the hair, and how can you allow that embryo to create the healthy hair? So there's a huge amount of proteins which go inside, huge amount of lipids go inside because scalp becomes drier, right? So there's a conditions called dandruff. Now dandruff is another this one. Dandruff is a five reasons. Okay, there's a excess keratolysis or excess generation of keratins cells, keratolytic cells. There's a loss of oil. There's a yeast which comes at acne. Sorry, it is a melasthesia that happens. Now all these five pathways had to be taken care of for the effective this one of for the dandruff. And the last one which I talked about before my talk is about anti-graying. I think any one of you can get anti-graying molecule and you can make $1 billion. Because that's a moving target. Nobody has got that molecule. That how can you stop? Because it doesn't happen in the skin. The skin always the melanin keeps generating, right? But somewhere in hair, at one day or in a month, the entire melanin stops synthesizing at the base of that follicle, and then the hair becomes white because there's no melanin. And why that switch happens in the scalp, but doesn't happen in the skin. In the skin, you say leukoderma, which has happened, but which is very rare. But everybody gets a white hair, and therefore what is that switch which happens for a particular hair? It doesn't happen for every hair. So what that switch which happens for one particular hair to become gray? Okay, and that's a mystery for everyone. A lot of scientists across the world are looking for this because this is a multi-billion molecule which come up if you stop graying of the hair. So this is what happens on a hair. So I just try to get you to the hair. There's a huge amount of work happens. There are huge amount of proteins or huge amount of nutrients being added through the microneedling. Okay, they have small injections which they give into the scalp because scalp is still a thicker compared to a skin, and that keeps happening. Let me come to nutraceuticals. I think it's a very interesting story. I think this is the word which was created by Dr. Phyllis, nutrition and pharmaceuticals. So now you understand why it is nutraceutical. It behaves like a pharmaceutical, but it comes through nutraceuticals. So all those molecules which you want for creating benefit or health for the for the body comes from the nutraceuticals. And so these are foods and foods which are beneficial in providing a lot of health benefits. Okay, and including there are some treatments and there are some prevention of diseases. So what is nutraceutical used for? And so improve health, delay aging process, prevent chronic diseases, increase life expectancy. And there's not much of difference between functional foods and nutraceutical. These are interchangeably used. Now, the functional food is a food which contains certain phytochemicals beyond their regular. So, what is the job of food? To provide proteins and provide energy, right? So they provide energy through carbohydrates and oil, and they get sorry, they get proteins for a building of the body mass. But beyond that, food is also a certain phytochemicals like the tomatoes has carotenes, sunflower will have a vitamin E, or grapes will have a resveratrol. All those molecules are there, and that molecules are there in a phytochemicals because of the nature's evolution. So when you see a lot of antioxidants, these fruits and plants are exposed to environment like us. Okay, and therefore they also need to be stopped from the oxidation which happens, because they also they are in UV, continuously exposed to UV, and therefore plant has created their own defense system, and these phytochemicals can be now used for humans. Now these have been people have been regularly consuming that part, but because of new lifestyle, people are not eating the foods, healthy foods. I'm saying they get so refined, they get fried, they get whatever it is. I mean, the foods today do not have a nutrition value of what the raw foods will have, because to make it sensorially better, to make palatable, to make non-smelly, everything happens. And therefore, how can you get this functional food? So, will you eat tomatoes more and carotenes more? And nutraceutical is exactly the materials which are there in the functional food. Can you separate those? So can you get vitamin E capsules? Can you get omega 3? So all those materials which are seen as a giving a benefit, you isolate them too and given a concentrated forms. And these are mostly antioxidants, phytochemicals, fatty acids, amino acids, probiotic. And these are exactly the same compound, but they're now isolated and enriched in terms of their content. Now, food supplements are more from a habit and from a more of content they have. But the nutraceutical, if you go, there's a good amount of research has happened on the nutraceuticals because they are in a concentrated form. And therefore, if you want to give nutraceutical something, there has to be some data. Uh, the data now on the nutraceuticals is very, not very, sometimes it is conclusive, but sometimes it's not conclusive, but it is very directional. That there are huge amount of oxidation happens in the body, you take antioxidants, you take anti-inflammatory compounds like curcumin, and that is the way it is working. And people are now doing huge amount of clinical trials. So those of you have are interested in clinical work, there is a huge amount of work which is happening in nutraceuticals on the clinicals, because they exactly see the what is happening in the body. They do a lot of in vitro studies first, okay, to look at all the IL-6, look at antioxidant DPPH assay, they look at the melanin synthesis, everything they do. Okay, and after in vitro, they go for in vivo, and there the entire RDA, how much to be eaten, it shouldn't become a toxic. So everything has been done. So I think there's huge amount of scope for pharmacy people into this area of creating or validation of the benefits. If you look at nutraceuticals, there are three areas majorly. One is about cancer, chemo, and radiotherapy. The second is mostly metabolic syndromes. I will not put cardiovascular disease, this metabolic syndrome or diabetes, because food is about giving glucose, right? So you should have ability to not give glucose to the body. Therefore, how do you create those diabetic friendly foods and create nutraceuticals? And then skin diseases, because what you eat reflects on your skin, and therefore this all this currently seen in the nutraceuticals. Um, there are a huge amount of nutraceuticals and their potential effects happen on the skin, and I've just put it there. There are only few lycopenes, omega 3, saponins, beta carotene happens in carotene, curcumin happens in turmeric. I think most of you must be knowing curcumin very well because it's talked about at a length and it has become mainstream in all over the world. But if you look at the nutraceuticals, okay, and their modes of actions, so they actually increase the life expectancy and their human health. And they also give you positive impact on all the diseases, cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis. But most of the activities of nutraceutical can be put into four buckets. You might have combination of activities, but there are four buckets. One is about anti-cancer activity. It's about that's about a cell proliferation and cell apoptosis. The second one is about anti-inflammatory activity, which is about NFKB and IL-6, IL-1B. Antioxidant activity is about ROS and a lot of superoxides, and anti-lipid activity is about uh, stopping the inflammation of the lipids and creating lower LDLs in this one. So I'll take one by one. I may not be able to go in detail of this, but nutraceuticals are more of chemopreventive agents, right? Now, if you look at cancer, what are the mechanisms you see? Okay, DNA alkylation happens, tumor initiation happens, proliferation and metastasis happens. Now, these nutraceuticals actually prevent most of this, okay, or one of this. Okay, autophagy and intrinsic apostasis happens because the cells become proliferated and they basically grow in numbers, and also there are death of the cells which happen. So what happens in nutraceutical is they attenuate cancer signaling pathways, which are supposed to play a role in carcinogenesis. Now, if you look at activation of vitamin D receptor, okay, vitamin D receptor is required in I'm saying the part of cancer prevention, okay, because it results in cell cycle arrest and apoptosis and angio. So you can get vitamin D from either standing in the sun, or there are materials which can give you vitamin D, and that's what you will see this capital available. Effect of prebiotics. Now, prebiotics is one thing. How many? I don't know how many of you know. Prebiotics is the high fiber, and a fiber is never get digested in the stomach because there are no enzymes in the body which can digest high fiber. So high fiber, which is called as a bulk in nutrition language, passes through the intestines, and when it goes to the large intestine, there are a lot of bacteria, and these bacteria ferment these fibers and create short chain fatty acids like propionates and butyrates. And these propionates and butyrates have been seen as a anti-cholesterol as well as anti-cancer activity. So a lot of fiber when people eat, the short chain fatty acids which you created, and they can also reduce the colon tumor. So there's huge amount of research been done, and the research has been done. I think polyphenols which come out of green tea, and the polyphenols are there in most of the antioxidants are polyphenols, which are flavonoids, anthocyanidins. All these have been shown because high oxidation is also a part of the cancer disease, and therefore you look at these polyphenols and they are used for a lot of cancers, which basically catechins which are there in the green tea. Yeah, can be they have anti-proliferative, anti-angiogenic also, where they take care of a blood vessel homeostasis. Curcumin, I think curcumin is mostly antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, and this one. I've done I'm currently doing a good work on curcumin. I think I have a huge data saying that it is much better in antioxidant and anti-inflammatory than vitamin C, which people are tout about. So it solves many of these pathways. NFB is about inflammation. WNT is about cancer. Now, I think I just tried to put it here. I picked up from an article that vitamin D can be used in prostate cancer, but I think these are all collectively can give you cancer prevention. Doesn't mean that you don't have anti-cancer drugs. I think when the cancer happens, see, the nutraceutical is mostly a preventive. Okay, it is preventive, and the pharma generally comes in a cure. Okay, so for a prevention, all this works well in the progress of this one, because cancer is also now looked at from a nutrition angle, that how type of food you eat, therefore it actually complements with the drug therapy which you have. Anti-inflammatory activity is another activity which nutraceutical gives. Now, inflammation is a part of growing up process. It's a part of process which happens in the body. Inflammation, when it's not that inflammation doesn't happen in body, but when you look at chronic inflammation, it generally creates a disease. So something like a people eating tobacco, there's inflammation inside the mouth, and therefore you get those inflammation, and then you get some type of cancers. So the chronic diseases lead to vascular, cardiovascular disease, pulmonary disease. So all metabolic syndromes are seen because of this. The lead is about inflammation, okay, and the cancer. Curcumin is touted the strongest in this. It's an anti-inflammatory agent, I think, used in periodontitis, and it inflammation in the patient suffering from chronic cutaneous. Actually, that's why curcumin is now used on the skin because there are chronic cutaneous application. The curcumin is highly antioxidant and highly inflammatory, and even the itch, that is chronic pruritus. PUFA, you might know that PUFAs are used as a omega-3 and omega-6 ratio. The omega-6 gives you some amount of inflammation. They are pro-inflammatory, but they are required by the body. But omega-3, which comes in salmons or linseed oil, is used for stopping that inflammation. And explain how NFKB is about same thing, that it's a transcription factor for enzyme for inflammation. Lycomine is another one which comes through the tomatoes. They can protect heart and prevent cardiovascular disease. Also, if you look at most of the spices have a antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties because they have ginger, cinnamon, peppermint, most of the spices, and possibly that is what the reason people are now postulating that we didn't have a much of COVID, okay, because we are using huge amount of spices, and the people who eat spices, where there's the evidence today that the people who are eating a lot of spices were survived better in COVID. There are probiotics. Probiotics are the one which are the bacteria which are available in the fermented food. Okay, and these are comes in curd and this and that, and they also have a huge amount of exert inflammatory effect. I can't call those names. Rhamnosus and Bifidobacterium, but these are all bacteria which give you anti-inflammation, and they also have anti-inflammatory activity. And so most of these are used in this one, and this is where I thought Bicalene is about beet, and then resveratrol, curcumin, gingerol, all those things are available. So most of the spices, most of the colored materials, so any colored material will have a good amount of anti-inflammatory activity. That's because the anthocyanidins, flavonoids, polyphenols all will have this anti-inflammatory activity. And the last one is about oxidative stress. And I think oxidation is a part of, again, a body process. You can't escape that. But body has these three enzymes called SOD, catalase, and GSH, which control that and keep that redox balance. It's called a redox balance. But because of a lot of, I think, our lifestyle, with the stress, everything, eating not right food, this redox balance doesn't get a help from a food. And the redox balance also goes more from oxidation, and it results in a accumulation of ROS, and ROS creates a problem with the DNA because it keeps oxidizing the DNA, and then there's a huge amount of epigenetic issues. Now, how do you create ROS? And this is the most, I think, assessed activity. In vitamin C, you see the potent antioxidants that calls for cells. But I can tell you, turmeric, the curcumin is much better than vitamin C. That's the data we have just found out, that if you want to use curcumin, it is one of the fantastic antioxidant. This one. As I said, antioxidants are there in food and vitamins and supplements. The foods are fruits and vegetables. Only thing what happens is these antioxidants get destroyed when you cook the food, and do a lot of this refining of the food. So brands of wheat bran and rice bran are fantastic supplier of antioxidant, but we don't eat them because that doesn't add to the taste of the food. And therefore all these materials which are there in the food, we generally refine them or remove them for the I mean, antioxidants get destroyed when you fry the material, right? Because they also get oxidized. And therefore, all these cooking practices to enhance the sensory value of food actually damages the innate phytochemicals which are present in this one. Beetroot has the betaline and phenolic compounds. They give you this LDL. They reduce. They do not allow LDL to oxidize, because once the LDL get oxidized, then you get through a cycle of cytokines and macrophages, and then you get a plaque in your arteries, and that is what the entire mechanism about. So they don't allow the oxidation of happen of LDL. And the dry fruits, I think everybody talks about this. The isoflavones and everything is there, which takes out diabetes. So this is what which happens in this one. Now, and the last one is anti-lipid activity. Now, hypercholesteremia, because the higher amount of cholesterol in the blood is seen as a presence of um, excessively low density lipoprotein, LDL. And a higher level of LDL is seen as a really clearly a linkage of either the atherosclerosis, which is a deposition of foam cells in the artery, or they are looking to the myocardial infarction, which is a heart muscle failure. So lipid lowering nutraceuticals are, are classified in the three groups. One is inhibition of cholesterol absorption. So from a food, the cholesterol get absorbed and it becomes a part of the body. So that inhibition of cholesterol absorption, inhibition of cholesterol synthesis, which because whatever you might say, the cholesterol in your body is 80% synthesized by your body, and 20% only comes from food. So there's a myth today saying that the cholesterol food mat khana, but the body has a cholesterol which is coming from food is only 20%. The 80% is innate property of the body to create cholesterol, because body cannot just depend on external supply and excretion of LDL. So you have less absorb, less synthesize, and excretion of this LDL, which happens to the stools. And these are three ways to actually manage this entire lipoproteins in the blood. So plant sterols, actually plant sterols are exactly similar structure like cholesterol. Okay, I mean it's just slightly different. And therefore, when the body takes this cholesterol and when you eat these cholesterols, body gets fooled that this is a cholesterol, and therefore it doesn't synthesize the cholesterol, and therefore it has an effect on lipid profiles, because plant cholesterol doesn't have a entire metabolic pathway like cholesterol. The red yeast rice also has the fermented rice has a small chain fatty acid. It has a potent effect on lowering lipid profiles. I think a lot of materials have I think Google Lipid from Google has a lot of this one. So if you look at this entire materials which can reduce the one is about less oil, one is about plant sterols and a dietary fibers, because dietary fibers ultimately provide a prebiotic in the large intestine and they create short chain fatty acids. And short chain fatty acids are seen as a cholesterol reducing. So all these materials are seen to be cholesterol reducing. And therefore, whenever people have a high LDL, reduce the oil and eat those plant sterols. And nowadays, people isolate plant sterols and give you as a capsule. So this is what being done. So anti-lipid is another big one, because India is supposed to be a diabetic capital and also metabolic syndrome capital. That's because of a large population and our sedentary lifestyle. Though the changes, I mean, the challenges in nutraceutical formulations are big one, and that is what is more important, and that is what all of you can study about the bioaccessibility. Now, it is inside the food, it is inside the formulation, and therefore, if you're eating it as a food, then how do you liberate? From the food matrix, because unless it liberates from a food matrix, it will never be bioavailable. How do you solubilize that, and what are the interaction it has in the stomach with the acid and with the enzymes, and that is more important. So that creates a bioaccessibility. The second one is that once you make it available, how do you absorb that part? So how does it go to the intestinal layer, then tight junction transport? How do you take a through a bilayer permeability? So all those has to be done. So one is about make it accessible. The second is absorption, and third one is transformation. Actually, there is a chemical degradation happens for certain this one, and that's the way they are active. Like if you take turmeric and curcumin, the curcumin has a second and third problem. Curcumin is not water soluble, and therefore, how do you absorb curcumin in the body? Okay, and once the curcumin get absorbed in the body, it gets transformed into tetrahydrocurcumin or curcumin sulfates or curcumin gluconates. They are not exactly curcumin, and therefore entire study on a curcumin seems to be slightly misplaced because these are the metabolites which exist in the body today. And therefore, what happens to the metabolism and chemical regulation is something which you see in vivo. Though in vitro everything looks good because you'll take these materials and do a cell line studies, but what happens in the body, what is their lifetime, what is their absorption is something to be done. And this is what a huge amount of work which is happening for making the nutraceuticals very effective. I'll not go through that. This is microorganisms assisted synthesis, but as a delivery part, the nanotechnology is coming big way, and you people might find this more familiar because this is what is about what you people do for your drug molecules. How do you systemic release? How do you allow them to get solubilized in the micro domains of these emulsions, and then how do you basically take them through the membranes, and how do you make them available at the active sites? And this is what is currently happening, and it's a big area for a pharma also as a nutraceuticals because both of them go through the same pathway. Second one is about the same thing, nanofabricated materials, and how do you basically take these carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and allow them to not get metabolized on the way, but make them available near the active site. That is what is happening. And the last one is about nutraceutical manufacturing. That's a big one. One is about ingredient sourcing. As you know, it's a biological species. The content in the ingredient content in every species is different. So if you look at curcumin, there are some 20, 30 species of curcumin, and they have a turmeric, and they have a curcumin from 2% to 9%. So where you will take which one is effective. Regulatory compliance, because once you are loading this particular nutraceuticals beyond food level, then there's a regulatory compliance because you can't overdose body with this. The supply chain management, which I said about that, how do you keep them safe in a supply chain management? Product stability and shelf life, which is, I think all these are, because you are doing this in pharma, but and a consumer education and safety concern. So all these challenges which currently happen in nutraceuticals, but I think the bigger part we people can play, and that's what I thought. And something, this is more important, which I love this chart, that you might look at nutraceutical and you might look at FMCG personal care. Both are same from this consideration because if you tell people to get crocin, even if it is bitter, people will have it because there's a huge amount of stat. Any medicine doesn't have sensorial appeal because it is to be gulped in 2 seconds, or that's what you do, and then what happens in the body you don't know. The nutraceutical and personal care is experience, okay, and therefore it is consumer driven. So if you don't make nice products, so you give whatever in a nutraceutical, if you don't make those milkshakes very very nice to drink, people will never drink it. And therefore consumer is a big part of this research, and the consumer research is a big one in these areas. Technology driven, you might talk about everything in a lab, but how do you make it happen on the large scale? That is more important because by the time you reach the large scale, you actually lose the efficacy, or you have to create those processes which can also be amenable for a large scale. And ultimately, do you make a business? Okay, because you don't want to create products which are not accessible by most of the populations. So I think this is what I thought I will talk to you about, and I think there's a huge amount of research, but I thought uh, what I can do it is try to give you a glimpse of what type of researches will happen. It's not a holistic list, it's not a complete, but this is the flavor of things happening, and which should excite you people to even get into these areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed a very interesting, a very eye-opening, as well as a very informative session. Without further ado, we have some questions that have come up in the chat box. I'll read it to you for
Good.
simplifying. There's a question asked by Dr. Anuradha ma'am, wherein she's asking if you could, Aruna ma'am, wherein she's asking if you could repeat the properties of coconut oil and its advantages while in the skincare department.
I think coconut oil is a very different oil because coconut oil is a short chain. This is called a medium chain triglyceride. Okay, it has a short chain. The fatty acid have a short chain and it has mostly lauric acid. So the first property it has is it moves very quickly into the skin, and therefore it becomes a part of the bilayer of the skin, and that's a great property. The second one is it basically has a huge amount of biological properties in terms of it creates the suppleness of the skin, and it also creates the collagen synthesis, because a drop in a collagen synthesis and elastin is the bigger part of a aging phenomena. And if that one gets resurrected, I think your skin will become supple and it will not create the wrinkles. Since it goes inside the skin, it is cosmetically better because then you don't get a stickiness on the skin. The second one is also when you ingest coconut oil, it basically gets through the different pathway, and it's called as a quick energy delivery, which is called as the lymphatic pathway. So it doesn't go through the same metabolism like long chain fatty acids or other vegetable oils. So in a in a in a patients which where the entire digestion is impaired, or for neonatal babies, coconut oil is a good food because that gives you instant energy. Second one is coconut oil. We have seen and we have a research paper that coconut oil actually penetrates the hair shaft, and therefore it strengthens the hair. Also, it goes inside the hair follicles within an hour after applying, and it has a huge amount of anti-hair fall properties. It also has a anti-graying property, but it's very difficult to show that property because I think the graying happens so slow compared to hair fall. It's very difficult to show to consumers that this is that. But the people who are using long term, coconut oil will always see that there's a reduction in gray hair. So all those properties are there. I think it makes the skin good. It makes the hair good, strand as well as follicle, and it also is a. Oh, sorry. One amount of this one we are seeing is it creates on the hydrolysis when you eat. It creates the hydrolysis. It creates one monolaurin, and one monolaurin has a high antiviral properties. So it is antibacterial, antiviral at the both times. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
And there's a huge amount of research available on that. And actually, we have our own papers published.
Moving on to our next question. Are there any side effects of frequent usage of waterless products like dry shampoo? And what is the frequency of usage of dry shampoo? It is asked by Miss Swarnali.
No, I think dry shampoos are being used as a more of currently may not come in a mainstream right now. Dry shampoos are used as a if you look at as a hostess situation when you're traveling and you don't have anything wash opportunity, people are doing that part. But there's a huge amount of work has to be done because what are those shampoos? Shampoos they basically absorb oil and they can be wiped off. Okay, but there's a huge amount of formulation which need to happen because entire shampoo if you look at there's a huge amount of experience of washing the hair, cleaning the hair, so that ritual gets missed, and therefore dry shampoos has not become a big success yet. But as you move, because ultimately you will be driven towards that, like people don't get water, what they will do, they ultimately have to use something. So it's more of a demand which needs to get from a consumer, but on the horizon it is lying there. So a lot of people are working on, even if you look at the fabric washing, people are working on electrical things like ultrasonics and everything, where you don't need you just take a water or you take a less water and put ultrasonics in that, and then the dirt get dislodged. So there's a good amount of work which is happening for a no water situation. But if you ask me anything becoming mainstream, no, not yet.
There is a question being asked by Dr. Chaitrali, wherein she's asking if any nutraceutical that can be helpful for hair growth and related problems.
I think anything, I mean, see, any nutraceutical when it shows up benefit, it's over a long time. Okay. So what happens in a hair? Hair is there two, three things happen. One is antioxidant properties you should take. You take anti-inflammatory and all these like biotin is something which you take for the hair, right? But if you think that it will be like a topical application of something like minoxidil, it will not happen. So all the food or the nutraceuticals are always a so acting. It's a preventive. Okay, it's never been. So if you start eating those foods, another 2 or 3 or 4 months you'll see the effect. But you can't see a very quick effect like what you see through the minoxidil or finasteride, because they are drug molecules which act on this one. Okay, so mostly you should have anything which is antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and that's more important.
Moving on to the next question, wherein we have Swaraj sir asking about, sir, what do you feel about nutraceutical API manufacturing? What are the major issues in manufacturing sectors of the API and excipients? As pharmacists, what can we do to improve it?
So what, I didn't get the question. API and Nutra is what together?
Yes, so he's asking about what do you feel about nutraceutical API as an actives manufacturing, and what are the major issues in manufacturing sectors of API and excipients, and what is the role of pharmacist in its improvement?
So I'm saying, see, I mean, people generally have two tablets, right? One is about your API and then something which is antioxidant like a vitamin or omega-3, right? Now, somewhere the regulation will never allow that part to come together. So first of all, it's a regulation tackling the regulation. I don't think if I get something cancer preventing drug, okay, and anything which is antioxidant. I don't think, but the I think more important part is somebody has to do these studies. That first of all, both these complement each other well, rather than taking separate ones, and then you have to go and ask for a regulatory, because regulatory will not give you any clearance on this part, because this is not yet been. I think this is not, nobody has tried yet this part. So it will be new for the industry and new for regulation also. But good point is, if you have suppose beet or you have beta carotene, and if you take anything else and do that part and show that you see the difference, because see, the two things happen very differently. Okay, drugs and medicines are acting instantly, and they, because they basically have been researched that way. Whereas nutraceuticals are slow acting and they are more of preventive. Okay, and that is what the problem will be. How do you, so you possibly might have to do a clinical switch for longer time and say that, oh, it doesn't recur, or you can say that if I take this one, it doesn't recur again, or it gives a longevity of my benefit. But somebody has to really think about it. And I think possibly food and a pharma people have to come together and think about it.
We have a question from Dr. Rajeshri ma'am as well, asking about how can we differentiate between cosmeceuticals and OTC product.
See, the OTC, see, the cosmeceuticals are I don't think the cosmeceuticals are currently falling into OTC, right? I don't think there are. I think minoxidil is one part which is now OTC, but it is also below 2% is OTC, about 2% is a doctor prescription, right? Now, cosmeceutical per se, depending on the molecule to molecule, you need to look at it. Okay. Now, I don't think there's anything about cosmeceuticals currently. Okay. There are BIS talks about cosmeceuticals, but I mean, you look at today, a cosmeceutical like vitamin C, people are adding 15% of vitamin C. So there's no regulations on the vitamin C right now. And there's no this one on cosmeceutical right now. And I don't think that's right, because you can't just load your skin with vitamin C. I don't think that approach is right, but currently the FDA doesn't look at it because these molecules have been seen as a edible, because that is what is the body, and therefore people are allowing it to do that part. But I don't think this is right. But I don't see any cosmeceutical coming as a OTC. And there's an RDA prescription that how much RDA should have as nutraceutical, but cosmeceutical may I never seen anything coming up unless it's something like a see, the OTC comes where where there's a huge amount of acne, where retinoic acid or benzoyl peroxide, there the OTC comes, because beyond the point retinoic acid irritates the skin. Okay, so there's a huge amount of regulations on how much of tridentine you add in, or how much of this one you add, benzoyl peroxide. That's because the skin becomes uncomfortable. But beyond that, I don't think any cosmeceutical has any regulations, because I don't think the regulations are evolved that way yet.
Two more questions. Are there any arginine and histidine products available in the market for skincare?
No, arginine and insulin I talked about from a point of view of nutraceutical, the ingestible. Okay, so there's a good amount of research from, I don't know, the Japanese company. They have shown that if you take, I think, a percentage of arginine and histidine, you actually get a moisturizer on the skin. I'll let you know which that company is. But we looked at it research, and I was surprised at why it should be like that. But they clearly had a see many times what happens is these companies do a clinical research, and you have to validate that part because many times what happens is clinical researches are also slightly a PR story sometimes. It may not be 100% false, but somewhere they are slightly make to look good and not 100% out of the place. So I think you should look at that part. We were actually trying to look at this part that how do you create a nutraceutical or a beauty from within. So we are trying to look at how do you create a beauty from within, that what type of molecules you should eat. And therefore, in that, I was just looking at that, but I don't have my own experience on this one. This is only that company's claim.
There is a question which is relating to lifestyle, wherein the Pallavi is asked this question, where she's asking if there's a relation between poor quality of sleep, which is known to affect skin health. So she wants to understand how does that happen, and also the sleep boosting personal care products, which is basically overnight eye mask, facial mask. What is its position in the market?
So I think there are two ways to look at it. First of all, sleep. I think the sleep deprivation is a big thing in life. Okay, and it has its own genesis in. I can go to Thomas Edison, and he created bulb, right? But he has created all these lifestyle problems. As a human being, as we evolved, we are supposed to see the daylight, and by 7 o'clock we should get into dark. Okay, and if you look at circadian rhythm, that melatonin increases in the night, and therefore you get a sleep, and that is what happens, right? So what happens is, since you have a huge amount of daylight, you have a screen, and your melatonin doesn't get synthesis. So body's propensity to fall asleep is not there. So what you do is simple experiment you can do. 7 o'clock you remove the lamp, the bed light, bedroom light, and you see that 8 o'clock you'll feel sleepy. That is because the body can create only melanin once it sees the darkness, because light doesn't allow you to do that. So entire circadian rhythm has got, I think, fractured because of light. So that's the one part. The entire stress part. So somebody was telling me that the people who work hard can sleep even on the road. Okay, there is so much of vehicular traffic, but we can't sleep. That's because the association of stress and there's so many mental things happening doesn't allow you to sleep. So sleep has, and therefore, if you don't sleep, the body doesn't recover. It is well known that if you don't sleep, the body doesn't recover. And all this stress ultimately cortisol and adrenaline creates a problem in, because it creates inflammation, it creates oxidation in the body, right? Because you're awake and you're not a thing. So that's the one part. Now, so therefore, sleep deprivation has an effect on this one, right? Now, people are trying to induce sleep by a lot of things. So somebody is inducing sleep by, so people very easily take a melatonin tablets. Okay, they are available, Melocet, or people eat melatonin containing foods, or people eat foods which can generate the melatonin. People are using aromatherapies, people are using meditation, people are calming the mind. So it's about calming the mind and creating that ecosystem. And we worked on certain things called the ragas, which happens, ragas which happen over a time. Okay, or there's a particular time which the raga has to be sung. That's because of the entire this body gets activated because of raga. So there's music, there's aromatherapy, there's a touch. All these things give you a sleep. Now that's one part. So creating a sleep is more important for you. That will never replace anything else. So you can have this one. Second one is this putting at patches and all this part. It's a topical thing. I don't think it has to do anything with the sleep. It's basically just the skin which has become darker under eye. You just put it there. But I'll tell you, I have worked for 30 years in personal care now. I think this problem nobody has able to solve to I think 100% under eye circles, and it's a genetic problem for Indian subcontinent. It's only prevalent in Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. All of us, we have a dark circles when our skin becomes slightly inflamed or undergoes through oxidation. But generally, if you look at Mongolians, Japanese do not have this part. But that's a genetic makeup for us.
Thank you so much, sir, Dr. Sudhakar. It was really very enlightening session. And more we hear from you, more questions come in mind. That's what we could see in today's audience. Lot of questions had come to you, and you have explained every concept so thoroughly. And you've given us the perspective of the science behind cosmeceuticals, cosmetics, and personal care product. Also, nutraceutical you have covered very nicely. And we are going to take away some important points from this session so that our research can include some of these important areas for maybe skincare products or oral nutraceuticals or anything else. I would like to take it forward. Let Mansi continue with for concluding the session. But I would like to personally thank you, sir, because it was really a brilliant session. And I'm sure everyone, and we are getting the feedback that all of them have liked it very much. Thank you very much,
So
sir.
I think I'm always available. I think whether I'm a proponent of cosmetics and I want to take it everywhere, whether I personally believe that cosmetics is a huge amount of science. I don't know, people have not recognized that, but there's a huge amount of science and at least huge amount of inputs from pharmaceuticals also. So I was saying any one of your students or anybody wants to contact, I will always be of the help.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed very informative session wherein we digged a lot upon skin, its different types,
I only told you 10% of what is available, okay? And that took me 1 hour. So if I take, I think it's a entire day it will go through. So if I want to talk about a research, what research being done in skin.
Yes, yes, yes. Indeed, even if it was 10% of what we learned, it was still a lot that was new for us. Right from skin structure to different parts, to different personal care, to different ways of its improvement, the ways it can if affect your aging skin, not just skin, but even the health, hair health aspects came into discussions. I would really like to express my gratitude to the Westcop team for organizing such uh, a beautiful session. And thank you, sir, for accepting our invite and joining us and sharing with us your experience, your inputs, your all the knowledge that you have earned throughout the years of your career with us in this field. So I would like to put in few instructions for the participants. The feedback form has been shared in the link in the chat box. Kindly do fill it up. Also, we have an upcoming session which is on rationale for selection of experimental design for optimization experiments in research, which will be from the Department of Quality Assurance. The date is tentatively as the third week of June. You will all those interested, we will all put up a flyer just like this one. You will all be given pre-informed about it as well. With this, I would like to conclude uh, for the session. Thank you, sir. Thank you, participants, and thank you everybody for your interest.
Good, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks.